Hi, this is Ron from housenub.org, and today what we're going to do is strip some paint. As you see, we have already stripped and refinished this door and the molding. The main thing to keep in mind about paint stripping is that heat works best. We've tried every kind of technique for stripping paint, and we believe that heat works best. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to show you some of our techniques for refinishing. So let's get started.
Collect a wide array of scraping tools. I like to go to flea markets and buy some vintage ones because they're really well made. Also, get yourself a pro quality heat gun. They're worth the price. You're going to use it a lot. And finally, an infrared heater. And these are paint stripping heaters. The same technology as a quartz space heater. They have 2 quartz heating elements in there. They're designed to heat the paint but not release toxic fumes. It still will burn the paint. That's why you have to make sure on the side guards that the heating element is about 2 inches from the paint. Here's the main thing to keep in mind when you're heating paint. You want the paint to pucker, puff up and peel away. Again, pucker, puff up and peel away. That's what you're looking for. If you leave it on too long, it will melt the paint. Look how this is puffed up. It's just like puff pastry. Look at that. That's what we want. The main thing to keep in mind is that chances are in your house, when people painted the woodwork, they did not strip it. They just painted right over the varnish. That means that the paint, in like 80% of the cases, the paint's just going to puff right up. You just have to apply the right amount of heat. So that's why you have to check it to see how it's going. Better to do less than more. When I first started, I was burning paint left and right, and I could not understand what was going on. But when you burn it, it melts, and then it adheres to the wood. Get as much as you can off with your big heat element, then move to your heat gun. Heat guns for the tight spaces like this bullseye here, and as you see, I'm using a ice pick. Now, the heat gun's going to be a lot hotter than your heat element, and so you got to be careful there. I use about an 80 grit to 100 grit sandpaper for the preliminary sanding. I'm just getting off the rough stuff here. There's a lot of crusty paint and whatnot. Just seeing what we have here. Now, just a reminder, when you're working with your heat gun and your heat element, you want to wear a mask because it will put off fumes, and particularly the heat gun will create toxic fumes if you're working with lead paint. And this is lead paint that I'm working with here, which is why you need to keep things wiped down. So we're getting up what we can, but as you see, at this point, we still have white paint ingrained in the wood. And this is soft yellow pine, and it really takes in the paint. So what do we do about that? Jill and I have learned, here's trick number 1. If we keep our tools really sharp, we can scrape off a top layer of the wood, just shaving the wood. Essentially what we're doing is we're sanding the wood with our scraping tools, and this gets out that paint saturated wood. And as you see here, I have a rounded tool that I'm moving through the gully. Here is a razor scraper, and you see this technique is something we've used all over the house to great effect. We're just applying some pressure and just shaving down. These are razor scrapers, again, so we don't have to sharpen the tools. They're already sharp, and they're just pulling up that wood very easily. Now, the great thing about using these tools is that they keep your hands away from the splinters, and they help redefine the molding. They help sharpen up the profile of the molding, which is really great. Now let me show you a close-up of the scraping method. Again, apply pressure at an angle and just scrape down. And as you see, it just creates wood shavings, just like this. Now, I sharpen my tools with a belt sander. You can use sandpaper or sharpening stone. This is not woodwork. This is not difficult. This takes a little bit of practice, but after you're doing it a while, you'll see that you'll get really good results. So I really encourage you to try this out. Once we're done with that, you can see we have a very clean wood now, and I'm just wiping this down with rubbing alcohol to make sure we've got everything we want. Once this is dried, and take like 5 minutes for that to dry, we're going to putty some of the holes that we found in the wood. And notice I'm using a dark putty, not a light one, because I'm going to use a dark stain. Very important. Now here is trick number 2. I'm going to paint over any paint that is showing through, any of these white spots that I couldn't get, because this is a depression, and I would have to have gouged this out. Now I just don't want to gouge the wood any more than it's already been gouged. So I'm just going to paint over these white specks that are showing through. And here again, I could take 2 hours to try to get this paint out from this crevice, but much easier just to take the dark paint. Now you can get somebody at the hardware store to help you find a paint that's going to act as an undertone for your stain. It's going to blend in well with the stain. That's the main thing. I'm using a very dark stain, and I'm using kind of a reddish brown paint here that's going to blend in well. We tested it out and it looks great. Now look here again at the bullseye. You'll see this little rim of white paint here. It would have taken me an hour or so to get that out. Much easier just to paint it over. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your job look a lot better. It's not perfect. Nothing in an old house is perfect, folks. But at worst, it's going to look like a blemish, in some places, like a blemish in the wood, but it's not going to look like paint showing through. Now here, to give you an example, I'm just staining over one of the touch-up areas, and as you see, it's going to blend in fairly well. It's not going to look really conspicuous. Keep in mind with your stain, the longer it sits on the wood, the darker that stain is going to be, the more the wood's going to take in. So I apply my stain with a sponge brush and then a rag just to wipe it down. You do not want the stain to be too wet, which is why we use a rag. After we're done with this, we let this dry for about a day, and then we will coat it with a satin polyurethane, not a gloss. Gloss is too shiny.
There you have it. Our technique is one of many you might try. We encourage you to experiment in your house and see what works best for you. For instance, one thing you might try is using shellac or varnish instead of polyurethane. That might give you even more original appearance for your woodwork. One historic note: you might wonder why so much woodwork in these old houses was painted. The explanation is that about 90 years ago, during the Edwardian period, homeowners were eager to get away from that old look and feel of the Victorian era, which had lasted so long. So they painted their woodwork. It was cheap and fast, and it gave a novel look to their interiors. And that continued through most of the 20th century. Now, chances are that 50 years from now, homeowners might decide that they like painted woodwork again, and they will undo all the work that we've just done. But that's the way it goes. My name is Ron. Jill is my partner. We are houselove.org. Good luck with your home project.